The Crew 2 review. Initial impressions. Yes, welcome back to the channel, fellas. Welcome back to the channel, fella. Now, the reason as to why I'm doing this review so early is because I've been reading a lot of comments in different forums, on different YouTube videos, across Twitter, and I've seen that a lot of people seem to be very interested in buying the Crew 2, but they're not willing to spend any money. They weren't willing to do any pre-orders until they saw reviews coming out. So this review is specifically for those of you who fall into that category. People who are intrigued by the game, want to buy the game, but just want to hear about the good points, the negative points, so that you can make an informed decision. And rest assured, just like I did with Gran Turismo Sport, I will be doing a follow-up between 3 to 6 months from now just to see how the game's getting on. As someone who was involved in alpha testing, as someone who has played 4 separate developmental builds of this game and has clocked over 100 hours playtime, as well as having the opportunity to speak directly to Fergus and the rest of the Ivory Tower dev team, I think I'm in a decent enough position to be able to give you guys my thoughts. So without further ado, let's get things underway. Physics, arguably the most contentious and most controversial topic when it comes to the Crew 2. So in the Crew 2, are the physics better than they were in the previous game? Yes. Do they come without bugs and issues? No. You see, the problem here is trying to summarize the full physics model as a whole as simply being bad or good or crap or brilliant is no different to going shopping for new paint for the walls in your new house and telling the person who's assisting you at the shop, I want blue. Do you realise how many different shades of blue there are? Light blue, royal blue, sky blue, baby blue, navy blue, dark blue. It's like going to a bakery and telling the person serving you at the counter, I'd like to buy a cake. You're at a bakery, son. Do you realise how many different types of cakes and pastries and donuts there are in the shop window? With the Crew 2, street racing cars, drift cars, GT cars, monster cars, Formula 1 style, drag vehicles, off-road trucks, rally raid vehicles, speedboats, power boats, helicopters, hovercrafts, stunt planes, dirt bikes, street bikes, all with their own individual physics and handling models set up specifically. I wouldn't turn around and say I don't like the colour blue. I will turn around and say I don't like that shade of blue. I wouldn't turn around and say I don't like cakes. There are some cakes that I really like, there are some cakes that I cannot stand. Guess what? When I open a packet of Skittles, I hate the orange ones, but I like the red ones, I like the yellow ones, and I like the blackcurrant looking ones, the purple ones. Does that mean that Skittles are crap? No, there are just 1 or 2 flavours in there that are crap. So to turn around and say physics are crap, or the physics are good, to me makes absolutely 0 sense whatsoever. Let's start off with the most important one. The reason why most of us buy the game, which is the street racing based physics. So the cars that you're going to be running all over the streets of New York, Miami, LA, etc. Now, when playing the Crew 2 for the first time, I noticed that the handling was sharper, more responsive, more grippier, and more all-round weight to the cars. They felt a little bit more tighter when going around corners. There was a sense of understeer, which personally I actually like. Areas that I think need to be improved is the way in which the suspension works when controlling some of these cars. It almost seems as if the suspension settings by default are just a little bit too soft, almost as if you've got pillows underneath each wheel from time to time. But this differs from car to car, and I think it's more to do with the way the weight balance shifts laterally when going from left to right. But nevertheless, it does take away from what is all round an improved driving experience. But having said that, when you jump into the RB13, the official Red Bull Formula 1 car, you do not have that same negative experience with the suspension. Everything just feels tight, really neat, almost as if the whole package comes together a lot better. And this is exactly what I'm trying to say. As you can see, the physics model falls down a bit when driving street cars, but on a track car the physics model is better. I'm not going to use the word perfect, that will be stupid, but can you see the differences upon what I'm talking about? This is why you can't blanket cover everything with just one summary. If you then move across to things like boats or the water-based action, initially I was very impressed. I liked the way how there were certain parts of water that was more shallow than others, and how that had a compound effect on how your boat would steer. You could feel the effects of the current. You could also feel the effects of the waves and the ripples being created from the boat in front when trying to slipstream. However, my biggest problem with the water-based racing is when you go over a jump and you land, for some reason it's almost as if you're penalised. You can be in a situation where you're a good, maybe 15 metres ahead of the boat behind, go over a jump, land, and then find that either the opposition is right beside you or has gone ahead of you. I don't know why that is, and it bothers me quite a lot. and I hope they fix it, because if not, then I'm just not going to participate in any jumps whatsoever. When it comes to off-roading, for me, the Crew 2 does it better than anyone else. Funnily enough, that very same thing that I criticised earlier, the whole soft suspension travel, is actually one of the benefits when going off-road. When you're going up and down those large hills, those mountainous sections, you can really see it being put to work. What I also like is that feeling you get when you're going downhill at a really fast speed on grass, and it's like you've kind of got control, but you kind of haven't. You're kind of teetering on the edge in the battle between you and the car, which when you think about it, you're pushing what, 300-400 horsepower down gravity on a slippery surface, probably got extra tread on the tyres, but there's still going to be that slip which provides proper unpredictability, which is what you would expect when driving at full pelt down a bumpy mountain of some sort. When it comes to air-based activities, so far I've got no complaints whatsoever in terms of the way the planes handle. They're agile, they're responsive, very easy to pick up and use, difficult if you want to pull off the most exuberant high scores, but this would not be a proper review of the physics if we did not speak about the most concerning aspect of all, the aspect that has got many people talking, including you probably watching this video, which is the topic of wall grinding or rail riding, whatever term you want to use. Now, for those who don't know, basically what happens in certain aspects is when you're going round corners on tight street circuits and you get to a stage whereby you might hit a barrier because you've judged it wrong. In most cases, you would expect your car to slow down or even come to a complete halt. What happens in the Crew 2 though is if this barrier is a long turn, what you can actually do is actually continue to rub up against it as you're driving round, but not lose any speed whatsoever. It's almost as if it's an extension of the existing track, which is obviously not supposed to be the case. The problem you've got here is that people who work really hard, who are skilled drivers, who manage to navigate around the track without hitting any barriers whatsoever, are now in a situation where there are people who are less skilled or take less care than driving, who should be being penalised for those mistakes, now able to compete with them and sometimes even beat them. Ivory Tower, I know you're aware of this because a lot of people have spoke about this already. Slap Train has spoken about it. Please get this fixed as quick as possible because this is a real problem. But aside from that, I hope you guys can now see that talking about the Crew 2's physics isn't just as simple as saying they're crap or they're really good. From the way that I've broken it down, you can see there are so many different areas to look at. Some parts of it work really well, other parts need quite a bit of improvement. So all in all, I'll say it's a mixed bag right now. Next up, let's take a look at the graphics and visuals, another strong focus point for such a vastly packed open world action arcade racer. Now, in the lead up to the game's announcement, there was expectation that the guys over at Ivory Tower would more than likely pick a different location for the game. As a lot of you know, the original Crew game, the Crew 1, was set in the United States of America, so there was a lot of people speculating as to whether or not this time they might go to Asia, maybe Africa, maybe Europe, who knows. Now, for obvious reasons and due to the type of events that are going to be happening in this game, they decided to stick with the United States of America again. But because they've added new vehicle types, including air-based, sea-based, and even new land-based vehicles, what they've had to do is actually redesign the map from the ground up. So yes, it is the same location. Yes, a lot of the places are the same, but the way in which those places have been put together have been different. New roads have been added, new shortcuts have been created, new buildings have been put in place, new assets. They've added more car parks, there's jumps, there's rooftop action. In addition to the real life circuits such as the Laguna Seca from the first game, they've even created some fictional circuits all over the map. They've had to redesign lakes, expand them, put new ones in, render proper water-based physics. They've added motocross dirt style terrain for the dirt bikes, as well as rallycross cars. You've got house locations. All of this before we even touch on the fact that they've actually had to increase the vertical scale of the map, or vertical axis if you want to call it that, to accommodate all the activity that happens in the sky because of the planes that we now have. Not only is this map far bigger than any of its rivals, none of its rivals come close, but the impressive thing is that you can actually explore more of this vast world than you can its rivals. For example, if you see a huge mountain in the distance, guess what? You can drive to it and then tackle that huge mountain. Restricted areas are to a minimum. With all of this explained, I'm sure you can understand that visually this is a very demanding project that Ivory Tower have tried to put together, and I'm pleased to say for the most part, from a graphical standpoint, the game looks beautiful. It's not perfect, but it looks very good indeed. At night time, when driving around places like New York or the Las Vegas Strip, the color grading shading is beautiful. The nighttime is really brought to life with all the ambient lighting, effects and visual enhancements. I've said this in a previous video and I'll say it again, as Watch Dogs 2 is obviously a game that falls under the Ubisoft umbrella, it would not surprise me if one or two of the guys that worked on that game from a graphics standpoint actually moved across onto Ivory Tower and helped with The Crew 2, because I can see striking similarities in the art style that's been deployed here. Now, that's not been officially put out, that's just me suspecting, having played both open world games. But to fully experience The Crew 2 in all of its visual beauty, you need to get a plane, you need to take to the sky, you need to be at one with the clouds and just simply look down at the whole of the United States as you're flying over it. The draw distance is fantastic. It holds up well whether or not you're playing on the bog standard PS4 and Xbox One consoles, and as you would expect, looks even better if you play on the One X, the Pro or PC. As I mentioned, it's not perfect. There are a few issues here. I think the biggest gripe and bugbearer for most people is obviously the situation in relation to the rear view mirrors and side mirrors not being rendered correctly and obviously being blurred down. Now, there is actually a developer interview that got put out by Ivory Tower, and the reason, well, they say the reason for this is because they wanted to ensure that the game itself ran as stable and as smooth as possible, and that having full-on reflections in a game of this magnitude was just a bit too much for them to squeeze out. Now, I'm aware that the cynical of you who just love to criticize and will not accept it even though it's coming from the horse's mouth will turn around and say, but hold on a minute, how come Forza can do it? Well, as I've mentioned already, Forza, brilliant game, visually stunning, but their open world is nowhere near as big, nowhere near as vast, much more restricted, has less activity going on at any one given time, and vertically nowhere near as high. With that being said, there are definitely a few texture problems here and there. If you actually cruise through the city and start to slow down and take screenshots here and there, you may find that there are one or two buildings whereby the text written across the front might be a little bit pixelated. Also, the car models do have a little bit of a plasticky look about them, very, very shiny, which for some people is fantastic, but a lot of people prefer a little bit of a more realistic and almost dirtier look, similar to what Need for Speed have got with Payback. I would say in terms of exterior car models, the Crew 2 is still a little bit behind Need for Speed and Forza. In terms of intricate details, lines and contours across car structural bodies, I think those two do a bit of a better job than the Crew 2, if I'm totally honest here, but by no means do the cars look bad. Sticking on the topic of cars, I want to move on to the audio, engine sounds if you will. Now, I'm going to be totally honest. The first game, the Crew 1, I didn't like the audio sounds. I just thought they were ridiculous for the most part. Some cars sounded meh at best, but by and large, I feel there was a big room for improvement. So the question is, has that improvement come in the Crew 2? Well, judging the audio is similar to judging the physics. It's a mixed bag. There are some cars where the audio sounds really good and close to lifelike, like the rotary that you find in the RX-7. But then there are situations where you can hear some sounds look as if they've been, or sound I should say, some sounds sound as if they've actually been copied and pasted and reused again in certain cars. Now, not too long ago, I put out two videos listening to how the engine sounds in the Crew 2. I've done one for Japanese and JDM cars, and I also done one for hypercars. And whilst listening to the audio through playback during my editing, I actually realised these issues, but I wasn't sure if it was just me going mad, because I can sometimes get things wrong, as we all do. But when I started reading through the list of comments from you guys who were adding the comments to those videos, thank you if you did drop a comment, I started to realise that my initial impressions were correct. Some cars sound beautiful, some cars sound meh, some cars sound off, and there's definitely a sort of copy and pasting going on here with certain sounds. But when we talk about audio, we're not just talking about engine sounds, we're also talking about the other bits and pieces as well. What I really like is the new backfire noise they've added. Now, I know a lot of you think that it's exaggerated, that it happens too often, but hey, I'd rather have it in there than not having it there. That massive bang followed by a quick burst of flames coming out of the exhaust is, oh, it's so satisfying. What I also like is the new tyre screeching that you've got when going around corners. When you take corners at fast speed, or at high speed I should say, you can hear the screeching almost as if you're tearing around the city at full speed. It's really, really satisfying and just adds to the overall driving experience. Next up, customization. Now, the Crew 2 is full of customization, from customizing your character and your outfits that they wear, to being able to chop and change the aftermarket parts for your car, as well as doing the same on the interior. In terms of the different available categories to be customized, it has no equal. It trumps all of its rivals, to the point where Fergus, somehow, I don't know how he managed to do it, but him and his team managed to convince Ferrari of all people, to not only allow their car to be in the game, but to even be modified to a decent extent. However, there are a couple of issues here that I need to address. Unlike its rivals, the Crew 2 doesn't have officially sponsored body kits. So for example, you're not going to find an RWB rear wing for the Porsche 911 Turbo, although you will find one that looks pretty damn close. You're not going to find any Rocket Bunny kits here either. All the parts that you see in the Crew 2 are either official parts directly from the manufacturer, or they're parts that have been put together and designed by Ivory Tower themselves. The second issue is rim selection. Now again, you have got a lot of official rims in the game, which is great, but unfortunately there are some rims that I just look at and I think to myself, surely you must have sniffed some substances to think that that would look good on a car. Rims that look like lollipops that you would win at a fun fair. I'm not going to put that on my sophisticated looking Mercedes Benz. I'm just not going to do it. And I feel the problem with this is that it just takes up space. I mean, do you know what? I shouldn't be saying this. There's probably someone out there that will go and take one of those twirly whirly rims and stick it on a BMW or something like that. But yeah, it's strange to say the least. What I also found that although there have been new parts, new bumpers, new rear wings, new spoilers added to the game, there are a big chunk of parts that were from the Crew 1. So if you're going from the Crew 1 to the Crew 2, a lot of the parts might seem a bit familiar. What I am pleased to see is the inclusion of a wrap editor. Now this is brand new to the series, brand new to the franchise. In the Crew 1, you did not have the ability to put layers on. You didn't have the ability to create brand new wraps. All you could do is basically take a sticker and stick it on as one layer, and that's basically it. I really like this feature because even though I'm not someone who's very good at making wraps myself, I know there's a massive community out there. There's a massive group of you who are really good with the art and design, and this just allows you to bring that creativity across into the Crew 2. They've done a good job at that, and all in all, yeah, thumbs up. If you're a fan of capturing action replays, or if you're a fan of reliving crazy moments, or maybe you're someone who's interested in doing cinematics, you will be pleased to know the Crew has got a fully fledged video editor, which allows you to go back and cut different frames out, stitch bits and pieces together, throw effects on. It's really jam-packed with all sorts of features similar to what you'll find in something like a GTA 5. There's also a fully feature-packed photography mode as well, so if you're familiar with things like Snap-O-Matic, if you're someone who can tell the difference between your ISO and aperture settings, or if you're someone who's just casually good at just chucking on a filter here and there when uploading stuff to things like Instagram, I'm pleased to say that the Crew has actually got an in-game photography system which is very easy to understand, and you can often come out with really good artistic looking results within a few moments of just playing around. Now, just to let you guys know, what you can see on screen right now are images that have been taken by members of my Discord. What I'm going to be doing now on a regular basis is uploading shots that have been taken in-game, sort of like a little showcase, just showcasing everybody's artistic talent. If that's something you're interested in, if you do like taking pictures in-game, join my Discord. It's going to be linked at the bottom, and on a weekly basis I will be selecting the best shots to feature in a video, so you could get a shout out. What's the point of a game if it's lacking in content? Well, for the most part, the Crew 2 delivers and delivers well in this area, but before we go into the good parts, I think we need to discuss the elephant in the room, the most obvious part where it's lacking, and that's in the fact that there is no PvP in the game at launch and won't be until towards the latter end of 2018. Now personally, when I first found out about this information, I had two trains of thought. The first train of thought is, oh dear, this is really bad. Not necessarily from a personal expectation, but for those of you who really love PvP and that's the main reason why you play racing games, I would fully understand the reasons as to why that might bother you. I mean, you spend all that time working on your car, upgrading it, getting it to max level. Of course you want to go online and take other people, and you're not going to be able to do that until, as I mentioned, the end of the year, which is roughly around 6 months from now. That is a long time for the game to survive before introducing that mode. My biggest fear, my biggest concern was, how are they going to be able to retain the fan base? How are they going to keep the game alive and not lose potentially millions of players? Then when I started to think about it some more, the second train of thought kicked in, which is, well, it's not the same, but you do still have some sort of multiplayer content to keep you entertained in the interim. First and foremost, unlike games like Need for Speed Payback, The Crew 2 does launch with fully fledged multiplayer free roam ability, so you can hop into the open world and you can just go completely wild, making up your own challenges. You can go to the salt flats and do drag runs, you can do point to point gumball events like AR12's gone and done, Nick's gone and done on his channel. You can even go out and just do road trips where you're cruising around. You can all hop into your drift builds and find a nice car park section. This is, if any game has a good chance of surviving without a fully fledged PvP mode for the first few months of the game's life cycle, it's The Crew 2, based on the vastness of that open world. Plane versus boat versus car races, sky-based acrobatic competitions, motorbike versus car challenges on one of the many tracks dotted around the United States. Honestly, the creativity levels are just, there's so much you can do. On top of this, I know it's not the same, but you do have the ability to do co-op PvE races. So the way that works is obviously you've got the main story progression mode. What you can do is you can take on those races with one of your friends or maybe a group of your friends and all progress together. So as I said, these two facilities, they're not the same as having a fully fledged PvP mode, but having those two there on top of the sheer amount of different events that are available. Don't forget, you've got events for street racing, drag racing, drift racing, boats, planes, water, all having their own competitions with their own end game bosses to beat. You don't have to take part in all of them if you don't want to. You can beat the game being the king of one racing family, or you could try and be the king of all motorsports, which again will continuously tide you over until that 6-month period is out. Also, for those of you who don't know, and I'm sure many of you do now, all DLC for the first 12 months will be completely free. Now, those of you who have picked up a season pass, basically what that gives you is a few extra cars to play around with when you load up the game, but it also gives you 7 days access to every single new car pack that gets added throughout the year. Across the next 12 months, Ivory Tower have announced they are going to be adding 2 new cars every single month. You will get access to that 7 days early if you've got the season pass, as well as I believe it's 3 new event types or some sort of content expansion that's going to be coming as well. There's going to be 3 of them, I believe, of which you will also have access to 7 days early. But nevertheless, the good thing is that they haven't just taken a look at the size of an individual's wallet and favoured those people first. What they've done is said, hey, we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to play this content, and I think that is the best way to do it moving forward. So content wise, I believe we are in a good place. And there you have it, guys, a review looking at the good points and bad points of The Crew 2, what they've done well, what they've achieved success in, and areas for improvement. You may have noticed I didn't cover anything in relation to the tuning and upgrading. That's because I've actually already done a video on that. I'll link that in the description and it should be popping up on your screen now, as well as the end of this video. As I mentioned, I will be revisiting The Crew 2 for another more in-depth review in 6 months time to see how the game has held up and to see whether or not any of the issues I've mentioned here have been addressed. But all in all, I'm massively impressed by this game. It's something I'm going to be putting loads more hours in. But what I'm most interested in is what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts and opinions on The Crew 2? Do you agree with what I've said? Do you disagree with points of it? Have you got more stuff to add that I've not brought up? Feel free to drop them in the comments box. I will be reading them. I'll be trying to respond to as many as possible, and I may even feature some in a forthcoming video. In the meantime, thank you so much for being patient and sticking throughout this long video. I will see you when the next video comes out. Take it easy, peace.